Hello and welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca and today I'm actually at Sywell Aerodrome, which is the place that I first met Geoff Carverhill at their monthly meet that they do over summer called the Wheel Nuts Meet. I've been to it a couple of times and I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before. I met Geoff here and he owns a Singer Gazelle Series 6 and we talked a little bit about his car because I love Gazelles and have kind of stayed in touch a little bit since then. And recently his second book on the history of Roots came out and I thought it would be a great time to have a chat with him about his relationship with cars and a little bit about the history of Roots and some of the stuff that he found whilst kind of carrying out the research for these books. So without further ado, we're going to invite Geoff into the back of my Morris Minor to have a little bit of a chat about the books. So I'm joined now by Geoff, who is an automotive journalist and historian, and you've written 2 books about the history of Roots, the Roots story, part 1 and part 2.
Yes.
But we'll go back and kind of work out how you got to that point. I guess we'll start with, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1978 Fiat 128.
Oh,
I bought it new.
Yeah.
I waited quite a long time before I actually got a car. I'd probably passed my test I had a license for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really afford a decent car, and then I got the opportunity of a company loan.
Yeah.
So I bought this new Fiat 128. It was very good. It didn't rust either.
Yeah. Which is unusual because a lot of people say the Italian cars do.
Oh, they used to. You just used to look at them and they rusted. But this one was actually quite good. Then I sold it to my brother, and then I took it. Oh, he had it for years, and then I don't know. I think it eventually did do quite a lot of mileage. It wasn't 100% reliable, I have to say, but it was a sort of car you could thrash it. It was amazing.
Because they're ever so small and quite fun, I think, for like throwing around corners and stuff.
It was front wheel drive. This is the smaller engine. It was a single overhead valve, 1100cc engine. Very light. It would go in all weathers. Yeah. I went into snow. I had first moved up to Northamptonshire. I used to go from London to Northampton. Yeah. In terrible weathers, and all other cars used to get stuck. Me, I just used to sail through. Yeah. And it was amazing little car.
So how long do you reckon you had that? Like.
About a couple of years.
Yeah. And then it obviously carried on its life.
Yeah.
Into.
Yeah.
So when did you start getting into classic cars?
I've been interested in cars since I was 4. Yeah. So I've had cars in my blood since then. My 2 passions are cars and music. Okay. And my brother was exactly the same. Yeah. So we both were obsessed with cars. So they weren't classic cars to us, they were just cars.
Yeah, and you've just kind of carried on
just evolved.
The love of the cars that you knew growing up.
I'm now writing about cars that were just ordinary cars in their day when I was at school.
So what's your kind of setup now in terms of your classic car garage? Because I know you through the Singer Club because you've got a lovely Singer Gazelle that actually we're at Sywell today and I met you here in the Gazelle at one of the Wheel Nuts.
You did, I forgot that, yes. Yeah. I've got, my first classic car, I don't like using that term actually, my first sort of toy, as it were, which I've still got, was 30 years ago when I bought it. It's a 1962 Pontiac Bonneville 2-door hardtop. And it's pretty exclusive. I think there's possibly one other one in the country, but there's not very many. And even in America, they're very rare. Yeah. So And
Very
I,
cool.
I when I was 9 years old, I wanted one.
Yeah.
My brother and I used to go to the motor shows and collect brochures, and I got all the Pontiac brochures.
Yeah.
And they always used the ad agency always used to put the Bonneville, because that was the top line car, on the front cover of the brochure. So I had this brochure when I was 9, and I got it confiscated at school, actually, because I was reading it and I shouldn't have been reading it at 9 years old at my primary school. And I saw this car and I thought, I'm going to have one day.
Yeah.
So when I got enough money together, I found one. It actually came from California, but that's not the first one I had. I had a Star Chief before that, which is the 4-door sedan version.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't quite what you'd always wanted.
The Star Chief was a good car. Unfortunately, it met a rather sad demise, in as much as it went to have the paint done, and the paint shop burnt down.
Oh gosh.
And it took with it an E-Type and a Camaro, and it was terribly sad. But anyway.
Wow.
So I got the insurance money, and with that I got the Bonneville.
Yeah.
And I went over to the States, and I looked all up and down the East Coast.
Yeah.
Went with Pontiac Club people, and I said, look, I want a Bonneville, and they were going, oh, why don't you have a Grand Prix? There's Grand Prix around. I went, no, I want a Bonneville. And I didn't find one. And eventually, one of the agents in London contacted me. I can't remember whether I was still in the States at the time. And he said, oh, there's a Bonneville for sale. I've seen it in the Los Angeles Times. We're going to get it. If you like it, we'll bring it over and you can have it.
Yeah.
I went, oh, all right then. And that was it. So they imported it, and I went and looked at it, said, yeah, okay, go for it. And it needed restoration, but it was clean. It was totally rust-free, because it was California.
Yeah, America, and the lack of salt on the roads and everything.
And so I've had it for 30 years. And it was our wedding car as well.
Oh. And never one you'd sell?
No.
So you've got that. You've got the Singer Gazelle. How long have you had that?
The Singer Gazelle I've had for 2 years now.
Oh, so relatively new.
New. Yeah, it's a Series 6, a lovely car. I've just done a bit more work on it. The Singer Club wants it to go to the NEC next year, so I'll try and do that. And I've got a classic, which is possibly a future classic, but it's also kind of a daily driver.
Yeah.
Which is a 1990 Mercedes-Benz 230E saloon.
Yeah.
Known as a W124.
Yeah.
And I got that because prior to that I'd had Volvos, V70s.
Yeah.
I've had 4 of them, and the last one had done 280,000 miles. That went. I thought, well, what shall I get? And I was talking to a mechanic. He said, oh, W124s, they're bulletproof. But I couldn't find one.
Yeah.
As luck had it, I looked on the internet one day. I was just, oh, there's one. But it's left-hand drive.
Oh.
So I bought it from a dealer, and it's been very good. I've had that for about 2 years now.
So both that and the Bonneville, I assume, are left-hand drive.
Yeah.
Do you find it difficult to switch between the two?
No, I'm ambidextrous.
Yeah.
And I can use both hands.
Yeah.
That's the joke. First joke of the interview. Oh, never mind.
So, that's all your cars?
That's all my cars.
Have you got any special memories that you've made since having them? Obviously, using the Bonneville as your wedding car was probably one.
Yeah, that's
that'll keep you in the good books of the wife mentioning that.
We've already started using the Mercedes more as a holiday car.
Yeah.
So because it's left-hand drive, we went to South Germany this year, what am I talking about? A few months ago.
Yeah.
Via Belgium. We're going to France next year, Holland possibly, because I've got a niece in Holland.
We did the Netherlands this year with Peggy, and it was amazing.
Yeah, so, and we'll probably go back to Belgium.
Yeah.
There's a very good record shop in Bruges. I can recommend it if anyone likes vinyl records. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Shall I say who it is?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's called Rombo, and they're fantastic. They're lovely people. Anyway, that's it. Advert out the way.
So you're using that as kind of like a holiday car, making all your memories in summer and stuff in it on the long distance drives.
But we, the Singer, we go out in that in the summer.
Yeah.
And we've only had it 2 years, but everybody loves the car. It's had a quite a remarkable sort of reaction to it.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, I used to have one of those," and they were one of the best cars ever made during that, wood dash. Considering it's 1966, wood dashboards were going out of fashion, but Roots continued with them until that model finished.
Yeah, the Singer Chamois all had them as well,
they did,
all the way through. So and I guess with the Bonneville, people's reaction to that is probably, oh wow, that's really interesting, but they won't have the memories associated with it, especially over here.
No.
Whereas with Roots cars, people are more likely to be able to relate to them and have the same sort of conversations I have at like petrol pumps and stuff.
Yeah.
Where people go, oh, Dad had one of those.
My dad had one of those. That's the common one. Yeah.
So was it getting the Singer that got you into writing about Roots?
No.
You did that before and then decided you should probably have the car?
The Roots, somebody said to me, you've been writing about Roots for a while, isn't it about time you had a Roots car? I said, well, I've got no garage, the usual sort of things. I've got no garage space, I haven't got enough money. It was a factually inaccurate statement to make. And then a friend of ours, in fact the chairman of the Singer Owners Club, said, there's one for sale if you're interested, because I know you like the Series 6. I said, yeah, they're really good. If I was going to have a Roots car, it would have been a Gazelle Series 6, which is what I've got. So he said, well, there's one for sale in Stevenage. I'll put you in touch with the bloke, but it'll go very quickly. I mean, they sell within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I went down and saw it, and I said to my wife, I'm going down to look at this Gazelle, but I'm not going to buy it. So I went.
When you're in front of the car and you start looking at it, you're like, no.
So it hadn't started for a while, and I said to the owner, I said, can we fire it up? So I fired it up, and it went first time. Mm-hmm. Oh God, can I buy it? So I said, okay, how much? So I phoned my wife back. On the way, I stopped at services and phoned her up. She said, did you get it? I said, yeah. So she knew.
At least she knew what to expect.
Yeah, she knew. So I mean, it's been great. So it's a delightful car.
Yeah. Yeah. And why was it the Series 6 that interested you?
It had a 1725 engine. It was the last of the Audax Gazelles, that shape of Gazelle. I just liked it. It had disc brakes. It was fairly modern, really. But in the old shape of the design that was instigated in 1956.
Yeah, that's the design of Gazelle that I've always... Well, I actually prefer, I think, the Series 2s and 3s with what my dad has always said is the impractical radiator. Yeah. Because whenever the bonnet goes up, the radiator grille goes with it. Yeah. And then you hit your head on it. Yeah, hit your head on it. Yes. So that was always the sort of car that I was like, I'd quite like to have one of them at some point.
I would have had one of those as well, but one just didn't come up. So
no, I think, and the other thing with searching for Singers and Gazelles and Vogues is that when I found searching for them on like Facebook Marketplace or anywhere that's not like a car specific auction site, you just get sewing machines coming up, which is the bane of any Singer owner's life. So finding actually cars coming up before they sell as quickly as they do is definitely a tricky one.
Yeah. Oh, they go very quickly. They're very popular.
Yeah. So
rare.
If the writing and stuff came before, when did you get into the automotive journalism?
I actually started writing about 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And I got into journalism by accident because I was a freelance photographer working for the local newspaper, the Northants Herald and Post as it was then, long since gone. And the editor was a friend of mine. He relied on me to do certain pictures they wanted. He'd phone me up silly hours, grab your camera gear, I've got a job for you. Yeah. And I'd go out, do it. I had a day job as well, but I wasn't married, so I could, it didn't matter. So I used to do that, and then I was always, at the time, we're talking mid-80s, I was a music promoter,
Yeah.
a part-time music promoter, and the editor of the paper used to do my music reviews, or he'd interview a musician to publicise the gig. And there was one time when he couldn't do it, and he phoned me out. He said, I can't do this one. You'll have to do it." I said, "Well, I can't. I'm the photographer." And he said, "Oh, you're a good writer. He said, "I know you can write. You can do it. You've seen me interview people." He sort of did a huff. He said, "Look, you've seen me interview people. You know what to do. Just do it, will you? I haven't got time." I went, "Oh, all right."
Okay.
So he said, "Just find the hook." He said, "Just remember, find the hook when you're interviewing." So I was like, "Okay." So it's an American trumpet player from New York, and I interviewed him. Interview went very well, and the gig was successful. I filed the copy. I did the pitches. He said, "Right, got yourself a job now." So and he would phone me up and say, "Can you do words and pictures, 8 paras, DPS, double page spread?"
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interview such and such. So I ended up doing that. Then I was doing music reviews again for them, and then I started writing for car club magazines.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of the sequence of events now. I was researching American car dealerships that had been in the UK, and how the American car got into the UK scene. And the assistant editor at Classic American got wind of this, and he met me at a car show one day, and he said, "You're doing some research on it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Could you write the history of Landrum and Hartman for us? Ben, the editor, says you know all about them." I said, "Well, I don't, but I'm researching them. Can you do it?" I went, "Yeah, okay, all right, leave it with me." So I did, and it was successful. We got the pictures from various archives. And then one of the sons of a guy called Gary Simpson, who was the son of Simpsons of Wembley, the Simpson brothers,
Right.
were one of the biggest American car dealers in England. He saw the article, wrote to the editor and said, "If you've done Landrums, why don't you do us? My father's still alive. He'd like to do an interview. Can Geoff Carverhill do it?" So they asked me to do it. I met him and his dad in a pub in North London, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Simpsons were the Ford Lincoln Mercury dealer. Landrums were the General Motors, so Cadillac, Chevrolet, Buick, etc. So I did that, and then one followed another. So there was a series after that, and then I started doing actual write-ups of readers' cars. So we do the photo shoot and write about the car and the history of the car, and it led from one after another. So I've been working for Classic American for 25 years.
So really came quite soon after the kind of stuff that you'd started doing with the local newspaper and music and stuff. It all kind of came quite
it all
quickly afterwards.
And that was it. They rely on you. The editor relies on you to give them a package that's ready to go, exactly what they want, to their brief, and that's the job. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And as far as books are concerned, I had no intention of writing a book until a friend of mine said his dad worked for Comma, the commercial vehicle arm of the Roots Group.
Yeah.
And this is how the Roots Group thing started off. And he said, "Oh, my dad used to work. He wants to write his memoirs. Would you help him?" So I said, "Yeah, all right, okay. I'm not really that well up on trucks, but I like trucks." And I got talking to him, and I thought, this is more than just a story of building commercial vehicles. He was talking about personal anecdotes, and it brought an added dynamic to the story.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is a book. I said, I'd like to take this a bit further. He said, yeah, of course, okay. So I got all his notes, I got it all written down, and I ended up contacting Renault, who own the rights to comma and carrier.
Yeah.
I ended up writing the comma story. So that was the first book I did. I put it to Crowwood Press. Well, I put it to various publishers. Some went, oh no. And then Crowwood said, oh yes, we like that. We like because if you do a proposition, you actually write down how you're going to format the book, and what the content is likely to be. And the commissioning editor at Crowwood, he said, I like your style. He said, because there's people involved.
Yeah, the individual stories.
He said, and I said, well, I like to write about people, because cars don't make themselves.
Yeah.
Trucks don't make themselves. They're made by people. They're created by people, and it just brings that added dynamic to a book. So I've used that style, whether it's been magazine articles for Classic American, all the books. I always bring the personal side of the story in terms of.
Can you remember any of, like, even one of the stories that was like a personal story from that first book?
From the comma story, there was quite a few. There was an example of how they built vehicles, but there was. I remember a lot of the comma guys were really funny.
Yeah.
Not that the car guys aren't funny, but these commercial vehicle builders had such a silly, ridiculous sense of humour. And there's one chap I went to see in Luton. I went visit him at his house, and just after the war, he was asked to go out to India.
Yeah.
And he said, we had a factory in Bombay, and they used to send knockdown kits of what's called the Comma Commando, which were built up with Indian bodywork.
Yeah.
In this factory in Bombay, now Mumbai. And he went there, and he said he had to go to various different depots to make sure all the parts supply was okay. And they loaned him an old Packard eight-cylinder car to go around in, but he couldn't actually. He said it was still a bit dangerous. It was a bit edgy because it was just after partition.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking probably 18 months after partition. So everything was still a little bit edgy, and the British Army was still there, overseeing things. And he said, you go to a village, and the head of the village would come out, and he'd give you a boiled egg and a horrible cup of tea, and you had to eat it and drink it and give him some money. He'd escort you through the village to the other end of the village, and then there'd be somebody else. You'd have to take the same from him and pay him so many rupees or whatever. Otherwise they wouldn't let you through. And so he said, this went on. He said, I was sick to death of boiled eggs and horrible cups of tea. And all these things that used to happen, but it's just the way they told the stories were hysterical.
Yeah. And then the challenge is obviously trying to transpose that to the page so that people can remember those stories and those stories don't get lost, but also the individual side of it in terms of them as individuals and their sense of humour and stuff crossing over. So there was the comma book, and then most recently you've done the Roots story part 1 and part 2.
Yes, basically the comma book was quite successful for Crowwood. So the managing director of Crowwood, when they didn't have a commissioning editor, used to phone me out. It was a very, really nice guy called Ken. And he said, why don't you do a Roots car book? I said, I haven't got time, Ken. I was running my own business at the time.
Yeah.
I said, I haven't got time. Oh, well, think about it.
Yeah.
So then he'd phone up from time to time and say, have you thought about the Roots car book? We want one done. He said, I said, well, I haven't got enough information on Roots cars. I said, I know Roots cars because I was actually wouldn't say I was brought up with them, but my brother had a Holman Superminx convertible, which I learnt to drive on. So I knew Roots cars from quite a young age. And so in 2013, I had a new commissioning editor, and Ken phoned me up again. He said, look, we've got a new commissioning editor. Why don't you meet up with her, have a chat, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Okay. So I did, and she was very knowledgeable, very good, and I was quite impressed by her, what she knew, and her professionalism. She said, well, what do you think should be, what would you like to do? I said, well, no one's actually done the Roots story. I thought, I'm digging a hole for myself here. She said, well, why don't you do it? We'll give you carte blanche, really. What do you want? What do you need? So I laid my terms out. I thought, well, they'll never accept that. And they said, yeah, okay, that's fine. Just go ahead.
Makes you wish you'd asked
just
for
do
more.
It. Just do it. And I said, okay. So I started writing it. And one of the conditions was, I said, I will write it if I have the go-ahead and the support of the Roots family.
Yeah.
Unless they give their blessing to me writing it, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So that was a proviso, because nobody had got near to the Roots family. Nobody had got close to the Roots family.
Yeah.
And in terms of journalists. So I then started to track down members of the Roots family, and the Roots Archive Centre gave me Tim Roots' details.
Yeah.
Tim was at that time, was in his early 80s. I think I phoned him up, and he said, well, come for coffee, 10 o'clock Monday morning. So I went there, went to his house, lovely house. And they had been upset by one or two things that had been written in the past about the Roots family.
Yeah.
And he said, I hope you're not going to do the same as such and such did. So I said, oh no, I want to do it with your cooperation. But I knew about this. I knew about there was a bit of ill feeling towards journalists. And he said, okay, well, what else have you done? I said, well, I wrote the comma story. So I got the publisher to send him a copy of the book. Anyway, he phoned me up the next day. He said, yes, I've read it. It's okay. Come next Monday and we'll have another chat. So I went there, and he'd got all this information from his own personal archives together with photographs. He said, well, off you go. You need to contact Nick, who's the current Lord Roots. He's on the Isle of Wight. There's and he gave me all the addresses of all the family to contact for their own personal story. So I contacted Nick, his lovely bloke, Lord Roots, and the family's become friends. Yeah. And through that, I got into the inner sanctum, as it were, and they gave me the what I needed to know about what went on.
So did you talk to the workers as well as so what was like the contrast between the two?
In the main, I would say the majority of workers loved working for the company, although they were all underpaid. It was one thing, we didn't get much money at Roots, but we liked working there. Yeah. And the overriding factor, especially with regard to the first Lord Roots, Billy Roots, everyone had such respect for him because he used to go and talk to people. Yeah. And that was a mistake that management after the Roots family made. They didn't talk to workers. Yeah. And it's all in the book. Yeah. It's all in that book.
Because that's the Chrysley years, so that's what.
Yeah, volume 1 is the making of the automotive, the history of the Roots Group up to 1959. Yeah. Volume 2 is the Chrysley years, and that deals with the lead in to how Roots became part of Chrysler and why they had to get extra finance, and why Chrysler Corporation took them over eventually, and it takes it up to 2007. which is right the end of Peugeot
Yeah.
period, and what happened.
Oh.
So there's a lot of people I spoke to over a period of years.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people kind of see Roots as really ending end of the 70s, end of the 60s, early 70s,
Yeah.
but forget about kind of how it continued in a different form after
it's
that.
just name changes.
Yeah.
And there was still people working for Chrysler, Chrysler and Peugeot, that worked for the Roots Group.
Yeah.
So there was one guy who was a paint chemist. He looked at he did his apprenticeship at Wrighton, started in 1966, and he finished with Peugeot. So he did all of the like the Hillman Hunter and the Avenger, and then went through to the Chrysler years. Then went through to Peugeot, doing like Peugeot 206, 309, all of those, and then retired when Peugeot finished.
Wow, they must have seen so many like changes, and to stick with it the whole time.
Yeah, I've tried to document the technical changes in production as well.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, because the production of cars itself completely changed.
Totally changed.
Yeah.
Totally changed.
Did you have any, like, obviously that's one guy's story, did you have any other like interesting things that you found that surprised you, or individual stories that really stood out to you?
It was interesting when you get to talk to people on the shop floor or even middle management.
Yeah.
They tell it like it really is. They don't hold back. They just tell exactly what the story is. So I've documented that and tried to put that in the books.
Yeah.
So that it relates to the vehicles, and it helps to answer questions as to why a car was good or perhaps not so good, and the reasons behind it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I think it's very easy. Like you see, like Top Gear and stuff do it, where they pick a certain car and talk about how rubbish it was, or the stories of, like, I don't know, overheating with the Hillman Imps gets kind of told over and over and over again, and it just becomes, oh well, I wouldn't buy one of those cars now. And that understanding why that might be is like, I think people talk about how the marinas, with the Morris marinas, the shells were moved along the production line, and part of the production line was exposed. And that story is that, oh well, that's why they were all rusty, because when it stopped on a weekend, they were all just left out exposed, kind of thing. And those sorts of stories then make it, oh, okay, well, that's why they were the way they were.
Yeah, it's the same with Roots. I've got a whole chapter in Volume 2 devoted to the Imp.
Yeah.
So I think it was important to do that.
Yeah, because it was almost, I guess, set up to fail a little bit, because it was so delayed in getting to the market, and the Mini had already come out and kind of made its mark.
It was a good car by the time it was fully developed, and it so very nearly was a real winner.
Yeah.
It was a good car at the end of it, and ask any imp owner, they'll tell you that as well. All of the Achilles heel side of the vehicle in the early days, that was all ironed out with the Mark II version. That was only a year after it was launched, 18 months after it was launched. So
it's amazing what damage just a short period of time can do for the rest of the...
I think it was during they're probably about 9 months to a year, and they decided to do a Mark II.
Yeah.
And get all of the upgrades into the Mark II that some of the engineers wanted to do to the Mark I.
From the start,
but there wasn't. I spoke to one senior engineer, and he said, we knew all the problems before it was launched. We knew what the problems were.
Yeah.
But there wasn't the money or the time to do it.
And I think that's money and time is probably one of the things that really impacted British car industry and making the cars here, was that there wasn't the investment and
No.
they just fizzled out.
Yeah. So I've tried to dispel a lot of the myths that go around, that have gone around in the motor trade and about the British motor industry.
Yeah.
And it applies not just to Roots but to all British car manufacturers.
Has doing the research given you a new appreciation for your Gazelle compared to like when your brother had the Minx?
It's just confirmed that what I thought at the time. It's a good car.
Yeah.
I like the car. It's I've always felt that they were good, and it's not, my attitude hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So I still think it's a great car.
Yeah. So I think we spoke at the NEC about the fact that you've been asked to do some other books, but you're not got the time, or have you changed your mind since then?
It's not so much time. The publishing industry is changing, and I'm not sure that I probably will do another project. So I've been, an owners club has approached me to do another project.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that at the moment.
But it's finding it a way that it works for you.
Yeah.
Is there like somebody that you would really love to interview that you haven't had the chance to speak to yet?
Well, I've done a few for Classic American, which have been on my one day I'd love to do that kind of, and one was John DeLorean. I wrote the John DeLorean story of when he was at General Motors.
Yeah.
I say nothing to do with the DMC-12, his own car, but it was the 17 years he spent at GM.
Yeah.
Which was much longer period than DeLorean Motors were doing. So I did that for Classic America, and that's been a great success, and I've been approached by people in the States to Catherine DeLorean in particular, his daughter. I've been in contact with her, and her and her husband loved it and said, we want to take this further, and I'm not sure whether I will. But
sometimes it's tricky to, like, once you've done a story, I guess, to find what else.
Yeah.
If you feel it's kind of complete.
I've done several stories of profiles of management at General Motors. I don't. There's nobody that I can think of that I'd really, really, really like to do. But because all of my heroes are getting on a bit, but I've already interviewed some of my childhood heroes, so Sterling Moss, Paddy Hopkirk, Andrew Cowan, who won the London Sydney Marathon, who was great. He was brilliant. Peter Proctor, who was in my opinion, an unsung hero. Yeah. He was the co-driver with Peter Harper, but he did a lot of driving, and I get the impression regretted that he couldn't do more driving with Andrew Cowan, because both those two were great mates, but they were also good teammates, and he achieved something that was, I have written about it in Classic American, but when the Ford Mustang came out, Peter Proctor and Andrew Cowan drove that. Proctor left Roots, and he went to work for Alan Mann Racing, who were the American Ford racing and rally team, and they won the touring class of I'm trying to think which rally it was. I can't remember it now. I should have got that. But they won the first competitive race for the Ford Mustang anywhere in the world before anyone in America had a victory with it. Yeah. And they were the first people to actually
Oh, wow.
win a victory with a Ford Mustang. They beat all the competition
Wow.
in the touring car class,
Yeah.
including Ferraris, including Alfa Romeo, Mercedes. They swept the board.
Amazing.
So
Yeah, I imagine there's some brilliant stories from their time
Yeah.
doing that race and stuff as well.
yeah, so yeah, he was, in my opinion, an unsung hero. But Sterling Moss was hilarious as well. Very amusing, very funny.
Is there any part of car history that you'd like to research and find out more of that you haven't done already, or?
No particular aspects. I've covered a lot of what I had wanted to cover.
Yeah.
I'd like to do a bit more on British car history.
Yeah.
I've covered quite a lot of American car history already.
Yeah.
But it's not so much an era. It's what goes with the story, which what the hook is.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
So if there's a good backstory there, that gives the story of the vehicle's dynamics.
Yeah.
So,
or good people who have got
Yeah,
good
yeah.
good stories to go with it.
I mean, I'll give you an example of a really good book. There's an author called Barney Sharrett who wrote a book called the Men and Motors of the Austin.
Yeah.
And he writes in a similar style to me. He interviewed people. It took him 20 years to do the book, and that's a great little book because I'm a BMC fan as well.
Yeah.
I was brought up with Morris Minors like this. The last time I was in one of these was probably I was about 12.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's great being, and it was similar colour to this ours anyway. But Barney Sharrett wrote this book on BMC, and he interviewed people that worked at the factory over a long period of time, and it just brings BMC to life.
Yeah.
Because you get the feeling of that you're almost on the floor. Shop floor. With or in the design office, or with people, and he did. That's a good book.
Yeah.
So
amazing. Well, thank you ever so much for sharing some of your stories, and I will leave some links in the description if people are interested in finding either of your books.
Yes.
Well, any of your books, because there's obviously the common one as well.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been great.
And see you again soon, I suspect.
Thank you.
So that was a really interesting chat. We had a lovely time talking in the car, and then also made use of the fantastic cafe here at the Sywell Aviator, and had some more chat and stories shared over a cup of tea before Geoff's headed off, and I'm about to head home too. I hope you really enjoyed hearing some of those stories. If you would like to hear and read some more of the fascinating stories that took place in the Roots workshops, in the Roots factory lines, then I can't recommend getting hold of a copy of the book enough. I will leave some links down below, as I did with Ray's book a few weeks ago. Perhaps something to spend some Christmas money on if you got gifted any this year. But in the meantime, thank you ever so much for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.